Willie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Williams. Good to see you again. It's good to be with you today. Although it's obviously been a momentous weekend for all of us, a heavy weekend, but very honored to be here with you today.
Yeah, it is. It is a heavy. It's a heavy weekend. It's very unfortunate. In this role that I fill with Center for Baptist Leadership, trying to help people process events, respond appropriately. Sometimes it's hard to just pause and feel the weight of these things. And
Yeah.
so, Willie, you're a pastor, right? So glad to get you in here. You're a senior pastor down there in Florida. As a pastor, as somebody who I trust would hate to have something like this happen to your church. What did you feel for, fellow pastor Jonathan Parnell as you watch this mob take over his church there at City's Church in St. Paul?
Right. I think you can't help but think, what if I was in that situation? What if this happened to us? You always think about that as a parent when you hear about one of these school incidences, how would we handle it? But as a pastor, you think about it. And boy, we've had, every pastor's probably had some disturbances from maybe a disturbed person or something that's happened. But to have a full blown protest like this, a group of people that, just kind of work their way into a worship service. I think people are forgetting, William, just a few months ago, I mean, there was a shooting in Minneapolis at a Catholic church with a deranged transgender activist that shot and murdered children. This is just, what has that been, a couple months? So this is a city in which Christians are probably on edge, a little nervous. Obviously, that's in the background. And then to have this happen, you don't know what's going to happen. So I thought, by the way, I don't know the pastor, but I thought he handled it so well. He showed extraordinary composure, didn't he? Because it would have been easy to get angry, start pushing. I'm not sure I would have killed my composure as well as he did. But he was extremely composed. But you just feel for the safety of your people, first of all. And of course, emotionally, they were very, very traumatized. So I certainly just feel for that congregation, the children, the people who are there just to come to worship. They just wanted to come and worship. We all saw the pictures of the children there. I just felt terrible for that church, and you can't help but think about how we would have responded if it happened here.
Yeah, that's well said, and I trust that many people are praying for City's Church. It certainly seems like that there's been an outpouring of prayer and support for them, for their pastor, Jonathan Parnell, and for the other people involved. And really what a horrible sort of motive here. These protesters agitators are claiming that there's somebody on staff there at the church who also works for ICE. I'm not confirming or denying that. I don't know if that's the case or not per se, for the purpose of this broadcast. But is that something a pastor can't do, Willie? Could a lay elder not serve in ICE? Is that outside of the boundaries for Christians in America?
No, of course not. I mean, let's remember, ICE is a law enforcement arm of the federal government. They have a law enforcement responsibility. So, I mean, we have church members that are part of the sheriff's department, the police department. I've had some that work for prosecutors, FBI, all kinds, and of course, military. I mean, so you were thankful for those people. Those people we're honored that they serve in our church. And then for a pastor, I don't know if it's again, I don't know the situation just like you, and that's it for another broadcast in terms of whether they had a pastor who served there or not. I don't have firsthand information of that, but for maybe a bivocational pastor or a pastor who serves in a non-vocational role to serve in that way, absolutely, it's not inconsistent. In fact, it's an honorable profession. We should be praying for them. We should be supporting them. We should be thankful for them. And just a horrendous motivation by these protesters.
Yeah, well, I agree. And so again, as a pastor, try to get some theological rebuttals to some of the things I've seen here. I've seen some people on the left side of things saying, you cannot serve. Jesus says you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve both Christ and ICE. I've also seen people invoke Jesus, flipping the tables in the temple as sort of a theological justification for these protesters. So how would you, as a theologian and pastor, dismantle those?
Well, both of those are just completely absurd. First of all, to say that a person can't serve in law enforcement, And be a follower of Christ or be a pastor is absurd. It is a noble, worthy profession. They are serving the interest of our country. They are serving the interest of our community. And however people want to politicize this and demonize ICE, it is absolutely invalid. We thank God for those men and I suppose women who serve in that role. I know the Director of Homeland Security is Secretary Noam. These are people of integrity. They're people of courage. They're people of bravery. Look, people can have disagreements as to what government should and shouldn't do, but and how they should do it. And there is a valid place in our courts to make various arguments, and in the political realm to make various arguments. But to say that it is somehow inconsistent with Christianity to be a law enforcement officer is absolute nonsense. It is to demonize law enforcement, and that is absolutely absurd. And then, I've heard that argument about flipping over tables. I've heard it to justify riots and social violence. But of course, that is not what that is about at all. That was Jesus challenging the Old Testament temple. And it does not justify the destruction of other people's property. It does not justify denying other people's civil rights. And so we just reject that out of hand. It's amazing how many people that don't believe the Bible, don't want to live by the Bible, love to quote the Bible to create some kind of political justification. But it absolutely doesn't work here. And we shouldn't be intimidated by that.
Yeah, well said. So I do think that this incident is a sort of a flashpoint for Southern Baptists in particular. And, this was a Southern Baptist church, not, in a Southern Baptist stronghold state by any means, right? In Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, St. Paul, outside of Minneapolis, this wasn't Alabama, all right? This wasn't Florida.
Yep.
But still, this is one of our Southern Baptist Convention churches.
Yep.
And these debates about immigration and ICE and things like this have been swirling in the Southern Baptist Convention, debates about how protesters should or shouldn't respond to different flashpoints in American life. So what do you think? How do you think Southern Baptists should take this? Because, I was in Washington, D.C. after George Floyd. There were, I remember, people after Ferguson. We saw a lot of Southern Baptist pastors and major leaders sort of almost siding with the BLM protesters that time. And these were BLM protesters this time too. This was like BLM anti-ICE.
Yep.
So is this a wake-up call for us as Southern Baptists? Is there a way we need to start changing how we view sort of the radical left in America? What's your takeaway here?
I think it is a wake-up call. I think it's a wake-up call for mainstream conservatives. I think it's a wake-up call, maybe not a wake-up call for reforming conservatives. They've maybe been saying some of this for a while. But I think everybody now who is with conservative biblical conviction is waking up to realize we are all together under an enormous threat. And leftism is not your grandfather's liberalism. This is not Gerald Ford versus Jimmy Carter. This is not, the liberalism that some people recognize in the latter part of the 20th century. This is a leftism that is much more like a communist party. It is much more like the radicals of Europe. It's much more following the playbook of radicals that have been written for generations. And I know communist is a pejorative term, but I'm using it here. It's out of that kind of a playbook. I actually heard a leader say, not recently, not long ago, that and I don't know where she got this quote. It may have been AOC or one of those kind of national Democratic leaders, that you really didn't have to get a majority. All you really need is about 2 or 3% of a population that's willing to go to the streets, and you can turn an entire society. And that is exactly what leftists try to do. They try to create so much disruption, so much pain, so much panic, that they hope that people in the middle of the road just say, look, we just want peace. Will everyone go back? So what do we need to do? In the last few years, William, a lot of us in the evangelical community, our empathy, our compassion, our values were weaponized against us. And some people saw it and pointed it out, and other people maybe were a little slower to see it. And that's what happened in the Black Lives Matter movement. That's what happened in George Floyd. You see things and you move to compassion, you care about people. And that somehow then blinds us to what is really going on. And that's kind of what happened over the last few years. And my hope is that more and more evangelicals are waking up to that you're being played, you're being fooled, you're being manipulated, your emotions and your values are being used against you, hoping that you will make bad judgments. We all care about people. If you're a Christian, you care about people. You care about marginalized people. You care about migrants, and you care about immigrants. Of course you do. Of course you have compassion on people. But what we're learning now is that illegal immigration is not compassionate. In fact, it's not only bad for Americans, it's bad for people who are migrating illegally. It's abusing people. It's trafficking people. It's absolutely mistreating people who want to migrate in a legal and orderly fashion. It's these are people who are trying to do it the right way, and they're getting, it's like standing in line and then somebody just keeps cutting in line. And you want to talk about the human trafficking that was happening under the Biden administration. It's like modern day slavery. So when you see a story and your compassion is weaponized against you, it's causing you to miss the larger issue here. Our country certainly has a right to have a legal laws that enforce an orderly civil process for legal immigration, and those laws have to be enforced for the good of everyone. And we should not allow our empathy or our compassion to be weaponized into making a foolish decision.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. We have had our empathy and our compassion weaponized against us. And the people that have been forgotten are the American citizens, are the people being trafficked. For years, you and I have both seen it. The rhetoric from many leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention or broader evangelicalism has been to focus on the marginalized or to focus on the migrant at the complete expense of the American citizen. Where is the compassion for the American citizen? And then when we have incidents like yesterday, well, it just puts it on clear display. Like, here are Southern Baptist brothers and sisters, and really this is the fruit of wokeness. If you've been defending wokeness, if you've been excusing it, if you've been saying things like riots is just the language of the unheard,
Yeah.
which is something I heard like Southern Baptist leaders say. Well, here it comes. They got heard yesterday in the church, and thank the Lord nobody got hurt. So, Willie, you're running. You've announced that you're willing to be nominated as the next president of the Southern Baptist Convention. This is the first time we're talking publicly since that happened. So, is this sort of part of why you're running? Obviously, we have a lot of issues to deal with in the Southern Baptist Convention unto the SBC, but are you looking to sort of help change the culture in the SBC on issues like these?
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to talking to you and talking to others as well. Over the next few months is kind of what you do if you're a candidate for an office like this, is you talk to a whole lot of people. And of course, I've always enjoyed our conversations, and they've been very fruitful. And I appreciate what you do, William. I do. I've described it as almost a woke riptide that happened in Florida. We know about riptides. A riptide is like an invisible current in the water that sucks you out to the deep water. And people don't intend to get in it. They don't want to get in it. But every year we have people drown in our beaches because usually it's a riptide. It's a massive current you can't see, and you get in it and it pulls you where you don't want to go. You and I have had these conversations. I've been very vocal and honest on podcasts with you before that riptide affected a lot of people. I even think it affected me. I know it did. When you talk to Southern Baptists about racial unity, every Southern Baptist is going to raise their hand and say, man, I want to work for racial unity and reconciliation. The sexual abuse crisis was Exhibit A. When you talk about sexual abuse, every Southern Baptist that I know of is going to raise their hand and say, hey, I want to be about stopping sexual abuse. But what we realized is when you volunteer to do those things, that the people pushing some of those agendas were not trying to primarily stop sexual abuse. There was a bigger agenda afoot, and it wasn't primarily about racial reconciliation. I've never known a Southern Baptist Convention that wasn't working on racial reconciliation. It was more about a political philosophy and a political strategy. Critical theory was that undercurrent riptide that was pulling people out. And I think moments like this, William, are those wake up moments that people who maybe they haven't really been vocal. Maybe they've been a little nervous about some of the criticisms that have been offered. I understand that, but they're waking up. They're waking up. Mainstream conservatives are waking up and saying, okay, we did get played here. We did get fooled. We did get manipulated. And it's not a lack of compassion to be convictional, to be courageous. As I said, it's actually good for everybody. It is loving our neighbor to stand on our convictions and to stand with courage and to stand with clarity. And that's what we need. We could give many, many examples of the last 10 years, but what we need going forward is a convention that is less trying to please a popular mob and is more interested in standing on what we know to be true and what we know to be right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happened, and everything you just said about sort of racial reconciliation, and then the so-called sex abuse crisis has been played on us on immigration too, in particular.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, and we saw this with the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of previous iterations, and their advocacy for things that could amount to amnesty, essentially did amount to amnesty. You know, we saw a lot of advocacy from them in prior years, primarily again for the migrants, illegal or legal, and not so much for the well-being of American citizens. I actually have been encouraged by some of the changes that we've seen, and I'd like for you to speak to that too, because you know I think that we both know a lot of people have been discouraged by the state of things in the Southern Baptist Convention. Some people think it's fine. The people I talk to are more discouraged. But slowly but surely, we're seeing, I think, a little bit of a change here, even in some of the reaction to what happened yesterday
Yep.
from NAM and even from the ERLC. So, and I will have to say, I do think that pressure, that change comes from pressure from people willing to say, hey, we're going in the wrong direction. Okay, I'm sorry you don't like me saying that, but we are. And slowly but surely things turn around. So, are you seeing some of that change already?
Well, yeah, I think everybody's kind of in the SBC been on the same page about this, and it's one of those moments that here's what I'm praying that it's catalytic. You know, to me the movement that we need to move things in the right direction is that the group I call mainstream conservatives and reforming conservatives realize, hey, we have a lot in common here. We have a common enemy, and they're coming after every one of us who hold to biblical convictional values. And so that is what can pull us together. So I'm grateful for their voices. I think what Southern Baptists are looking for is people who say, "Hey, I got it. I may have gotten some things wrong." The people who are talking about critical theory, the people who are warning us about wokeness, they were right. And I don't think they want people who just kind of move on as if nothing happened. Like, please forget everything that happened the last 10 years. I think we need to say collectively, really, not everyone got it wrong, of course, but collectively, we need to say, hey, we got some things wrong. We were weakened in our position. And it's not just a perception of a few people who are just noisy and disenfranchised. I'm telling you already, I'm talking to a lot of pastors, and you're right. There are a lot of pastors who are very, very concerned, and they feel like that we weakened in our resolve, in our conviction, in our clarity, and they want to see the Southern Baptist Convention be a strong force for truth in our culture. And again, that is not an anti-immigrant position. We care about people. You care about people of every race and every color and every tribe, but having laws and doing things in a just manner, that benefits everyone, including our American neighbors, and we should care about our American neighbors. Illegal immigration is a threat to so many people, and we know why it's being done. We know either through direct manipulation or incompetence. We know what happened in the last administration. Millions of people flooded across the border. That is not good for them. That is not good for American citizens, and that is not good for our future. We have to have a better way. And this administration, at least, is trying to enforce the laws, and I'm grateful they are, and I think we ought to pray for them. They may not get every single thing right, but we need to enforce the laws if we're going to have an orderly process, and we need an orderly process.
Yeah, well said. So one of the things that I've spoken out about quite a bit with Center for Baptist Leadership, and really is sort of integral to our vision and our mission, is that the Southern Baptist Convention has a role to play in American public life. Right. I'm so thankful for the Southern Baptist Convention and the missionaries we send,
Yep.
and for the churches we plant, for the evangelism we do, and the discipleship that happens in our local churches. I'm a part of that. I'm thankful for my local church. But there has been over the last many years sort of this almost spiritual and sort of political natural world bifurcation where we
Right.
talk about being on mission. And I think sometimes we forget that we are on mission somewhere And for the vast majority of us, the place we're on mission is the United States of America. And what happens here matters. And when you see how big the Southern Baptist Convention is compared to other denominations. I had somebody jokingly mention to me, remind me, there are more Wiccans in America than there are PCAs, like PCAers, right? So it's like we talk about the SBC and the PCA as sort of the two main conservative denominations, but the PCA is just so much smaller compared to us. I'm not knocking them, I'm just stating the numbers. The Southern Baptist Convention could play, I would say, a really big role in the renewal of America. What's your thought on that? Can we do that? Can we walk and chew gum? Can we be mission minded and public minded as well? And what does that look like?
Yeah, we have to. We have to. And yes, we can. This is one of the biggest places you see the drift. The dominant message of the last, I'll just say 20 years. I'm not trying to fix it in a single person or a single moment, but the dominant message over the last 20 years was to pull us out of political, cultural debates. It was a fruit of pragmatism and a missiological strategy. Again, you've talked a lot about the third way, and it's kind of been diagnosed to death, but and it can be defined different ways, but it's God's not on the right or the left, words that I myself have used, and that there's an element of truth in that. Of course, God isn't bound by changing political definitions, but that whole idea of we're going to be quiet about the cultural political issues. We're going to be, in essence, apolitical. Well, let me tell you, it didn't work missiologically. It didn't make us more effective. It wasn't that all of a sudden people from the cultural and moral left started flooding in our churches because they thought we were nice, because it didn't work. What it did, ironically, is there's a whole mission field out there that was looking to the church for courage and conviction in a moment of cultural confusion. And what they heard in many of our institutions were we were as weak as other institutions. In reality, we missed a missiological opportunity by being bold and courageous about political, cultural, moral issues. So one of the things I've called for, we put up a little website called baptistrenewal.us, and I've talked about 7 pillars of Baptist renewal, and one of those is cultural responsibility. We've got to reclaim our responsibility to speak prophetically into the culture. We cannot be afraid of hot button issues. We cannot be afraid of political issues. We're not a handmaiden for either party, but we must fulfill our role to speak truth to a culture that desperately needs to see an institution that is not going to waver. And too often, under the heading of missiological effectiveness, we were told to be, I can quote the people who told me, I can quote, and I think they meant it sincerely, that we're not culture warriors, we are to be gospel missionaries, as if you must choose A or B. But the reality is several people have demonstrated, I'm thinking Charlie Kirk here, several people demonstrated that when you have the courage to speak into cultural and moral issues, it actually opens the door to greater gospel effectiveness. Our culture needs an institution that is grounded in the truth and unafraid of the mob. And if the Southern Baptist Convention can rise up and reclaim that prophetic mantle, it can have a powerful impact in our culture, and it needs to happen.
Oh, praise God for that vision, Willie. That's very encouraging. I agree completely. And really just makes me think this is what it means to be salt and light.
Yeah.
Salt and light. Let's stop hiding our light under a bushel. And also, and I know you know this, that the way that messaging worked, where they told us not to be political, actually almost always was either overt or softly political to the left.
Absolutely.
Right? Don't be political, but here on this moral issue that appeases the left, actually you can be political. We've talked with Joe Rigney on this show before about how, sometimes it's okay to just call balls and strikes. And if the cultural right wing is biblically and morally correct on an issue, we don't have to pretend like they're not. Like what happened yesterday. So with just the last few minutes here, Willie, sort of what would be your encouragement to all the Southern Baptist churches that watched this yesterday? any final words of encouragement
Well,
for City's church?
we've talked about a wake-up call. I mean, first, on a practical level, I think pastors need to beware. They need to be, there's a practical level that could be talked about: security, protection, preparation. You need to imagine this can and will. All of us have practiced for other unthinkable things, and we've tried to prepare about that. We need to be prepared for things like this going forward. But on the spiritual level, it just reminds us we are in a battle, and we are hated, and our message is not going to be loved by everybody. And we need to be prepared for a far more intense cultural battle than most of us have ever known in our life. Being faithful and being prophetic is going to demand it. And so it's time that we accept that God has put us here for this moment. It's time for us to step up to the plate. It's time for us to wake up. We cannot be silent. We cannot be neutral. We have to be bold. We have to be strong. We have to be courageous.
Amen. Willie, where can people keep up with the work that you're doing in general and learn more about why you want to be our next president of the
Yeah.
Southern Baptist Convention?
We put that website, baptistrenewal.us. baptistrenewal.us. We put the 7 pillars, what we're calling 7 pillars of Baptist renewal. And that's what we're praying for. It's not about an election or a person. It's about a movement that we all need. And it's much bigger than a man. We need a movement. So we need a renewal. And I think that on that website, we put 7 pillars of renewal. And as the spring goes along, we'll be posting more things there. There's some podcasts we've done, some messages we've shared, so people can learn a little bit more about me. And there's even a way to communicate with us as we go through this spring and we talk about what a Baptist renewal is going to look like.
Great. Well, I look forward to seeing you out there everywhere else, and hopefully back here to talk more specifically about the Southern Baptist Convention in the months to come. Thank you for your courageous leadership. I really appreciated some of the things you said. And I would be remiss not to mention, just because I'm such an anti-communist, I really liked your post where you said communists doing communist things. I mean, that's really that's the kind of leadership we need. So, Willie, thanks for joining.
The Center for Baptist Leadership podcast is powered by American Reformer, hosted by William Wolfe, with audio production by Jared Cummings. Our music is a custom remix of Soldiers of Christ in Truth Arrayed, the official hymn of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. To help CBL reform and revitalize Christian institutions, please consider making a generous donation today at centerforbaptistleadership.org.